Hi and welcome to this DCP web tutorial. In today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to create this glass shader with particle effects. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up Blender and we'll click on General like usual. If you've not used Blender before, I'll put some links in the YouTube description to some other tutorials I've created. And we'll click on this cube and delete that, so hit the delete key, click on the light source and delete that as well. And let's go to File, Save As, and I'm just going to call this Glass Shader and Particles -01, and I want to add a sphere. So let's press Shift and A and add a UV sphere, and then we'll click on that UV sphere and we're going to scale it. So there's two ways to scale it. You can either scale it by using the tools here, or you can press the letter S on your keyboard and just type in a number, and we're going to type in number 4, and that will scale the X, the Y and the Z by 4 like this here. Let's go to the add modifier, and you can see there's little panels here, right? These faces, we call these faces, and what we want to do is make, can you see how it's quite jagged around the edge? We want to smooth that out, so we'll create a subdivision here. So we're clicking on the modifier, go to add modifier and subdivision, and we're going to set that both to 3, and now you can see these little square panels are much smaller, which smooths out the object. So let's click apply, and then we'll right click and shade smooth, and that will smooth out even more. So now you can see it's a nice smooth spherical object. Let's zoom out, and we want the green line to be facing this way and the red line or the X and Y to be facing like this, right? And the next thing we want to do is apply a material to this sphere. So let's click on the sphere itself, and for now we'll go into look dev mode. So look dev mode is like temporary display a look. It's basically displaying a light source, but a temporary light source. It's not one that will show and render. It's just for you to experiment with without having to add a lot of lighting. Think of it that way. So we can click on this drop down, click here, and you can see all the different types of lighting. So you've got like ones with blue in there and green and stuff like that. It doesn't really matter which one you pick, but I would say try and pick one with a lot of light in there, right? Not a dark one. So let's pick this one here, for example. Yeah, you can see little shines on the edges here. So let's go ahead and click on this sphere and rename it to sphere glass, and we should copy that text sphere glass, because we're going to go to the material, we're going to click new material, and then we should label these materials, name them. Whatever the object is, you should name the material the same. That way later you can just cross-reference them quite easily and understand in this drop down what all the materials are. Otherwise it starts to get confusing when you've got a lot of things in here. So name your materials, that's a good bit of advice. Let's click on this surface here, and we want to set it to a glass shader. And with the glass I want to set the roughness to 0.233. These are very specific numbers, and we can later go and experiment with them to change how this glass shader looks, but for now we're going to set them to these particular numbers, and we want to turn back face culling on, and in this first drop down we want to set it to alpha blend, and in the second one we'll set it to none, and then we're going to turn on screen space refractions here as well. So let's go over to the render options here, and we want to turn on the bloom, and we want to turn on screen space reflections, and we want to give these screen space reflections some settings. So let's click on this little arrow to, where is it, this one here, and we turn on refractions, turn off half trace, set the trace position and the max roughness all the way to the top. So now you can start to see this this sphere being created, right? And it's see-through. You can actually see through the sphere, which is what we want. It's like glass, it's behaving like glass, right? And what we want to do is create some particles. So to do that, let's go to File, Save As, and save it as version 2. Save it as version 2, and we're going to press Shift A and insert another UV sphere. So this UV sphere is actually sitting right in the middle of the other one. You can see that, and you can see it's kind of sitting right in the middle. That's what we want, and we want to scale that. So sometimes it's worth having the move tool available, so you can just move things quite easily, but what we want to do is scale this object in the center, and let's rename it to sphere. In fact, let's just call it emitter. It's going to be a particle emitter right there, and it's set to 111, so we want to set this to like 0.5, 0.5, maybe even smaller than that. I think let's set it to 0.5. In fact, let's set it to 0.1. I want to make it really small, yeah. 0.1 and 0.1, so it's quite tiny right there. And now we want to add another another UV sphere, because that's going to become our particle. So let's just press Ctrl S to save. Let's press Shift A and select UV sphere here, and we'll drag it out to the side. And then on this UV sphere, we want to duplicate it twice. So click on it, press Shift D to duplicate, and then press Shift and D one more time and hit the Enter key. So we should see one more here. We'll click here, drag that one, and now we've got 3 of them. And they're just named sphere 1, 2, and 3 here. Well, actually named sphere here, right? So let's call this particle 1. This other one here, we're going to call it particle 2. And then the third one, we're going to call it particle 3. Let's click on that first particle, and we'll go to the material. Let's copy the name particle 1. In fact, these are slightly in the opposite order. Really, this one should be sitting here to be just to make life a little bit easier, because then this is 1, 2, and 3, right? 1, 2, and 3 here. So let's click on the first one, double click, copy this text here, and go to the material, click new, paste that into here so you know that's the material for it. Go to the surface and select emission, and inside here you can pick any color you want. I'm going to go for like an orange sort of. No, actually I'm going to go for a green sort of color, green, and set the strength to 50. It's going to be quite bright, right? We may reduce or increase that, I'm not quite sure yet, so we have to experiment. In fact, let's bring that down, that's a bit too much, right? Let's set it to around 25 for now. And then we'll click on the second one and do the same thing. So we'll click new, and we'll name that particle 2. We'll go to here, select emission, set it to 25, and this one I'm going to leave white. And then the last one, I'm going to probably, I don't know what color, see. Let's click new, let's set that to particle 3. Let's click here, go to the emission, and we'll set it to 25 as well. And I think maybe we'll go for like a blue color. We can change these colors afterwards, not a problem. We can change it to whatever we want. We don't want these particles sitting so close to this object, so let's select all 3 of them. Let's click on particle 1, 2, and 3. So click on the first one, hold the shift key, and select all 3 of them, and just zoom right out and drag them all the way up here somewhere, away from your scene, so they're not emitting light and catching the light here or anything like that, not affecting your scene in any way. They're well out the way. Normally I put them above, because if you rotate around you might see them in the distance, but above it's highly unlikely you're going to point the camera below pointing upwards. That's highly likely it's not going to happen really. So let's go to file, save as, and save this as version 3, and then we want to create a collection for these 3 particles. So let's right click here and click new, and let's label this particles. Select the first one, hold the shift key, and select the other ones and drag this into this collection called particles. We've got all 3 in this collection. Let's click on the emitter and go to the particles here. Let's see, and then click the plus button to create a new particle system. And we want to let's set the particles to around 100 for now. We might increase or reduce them, I'm not quite sure yet. And right now we've got 250 frames, so let's set this to 300 for now. We'll increase the frames slightly, and this red line is a bit hard for you maybe to see, but on this timeline there's this red line. This red line represents when all of the particles will finish off in the scene. So right now it's set to 250, so you can either increase the number of particles and that will affect that red line maybe a little bit, but really what you want to change is either the end when they stop emitting, or their lifetime. So we're going to increase their lifetime, and you'll see that red line will grow. This is a way to really determine when those particles will disappear in your scene. You can either increase the lifetime or increase the end This is basically saying when will all of the particles finish emitting. So on frame 200, which is here, all 100 particles will be in the scene, and by the time it gets to 295 or whatever it is, they'll have all died off, right? Their lifetime would have been finished. Let's go to the field weights here and turn off the gravity. We'll go to the render settings here and turn off show emitter. Click the halo here, drop down and select collection, and click here and select particles, and then select random. And in theory, let's go back and play. We should start to see these particles being emitted. If we turn off our overlays, we'll see them being emitted within this sphere, like this, right? And we don't want to see that that sphere in the center. So right in the render, it actually won't show. But if you go down to here in viewport, you need to turn it off here as well. Now it actually won't show in the render itself. So that's how you can just hide that emitter. Now you can go back here. Let's see. We'll set the. Let's try and adjust the size a little bit here. Let's set the size. Where is the size? Size is here. So I think we'll reduce that slightly, and we'll play around with these settings a little bit more in a moment. So let's go to File, Save, and then File, Save As, and let's save this as version 4. Let's pause this for the moment. Okay, so at the moment we're using this look dev in our viewport to see what the lighting will look like depending on which one of these HDRI maps we're selecting, right? So we want to actually add our own HDRI map. So let's minimize this and we'll go ahead and open up our web browser and we'll type in here HDRI Haven. So go to HDRI Haven, open up this folder. Hopefully you've got one on your desktop as well. Right click and create a folder, call it HDRI, and then inside that folder we're going to download a map. Let's download a few of them. So we'll click here. I'm going to download my standard one, which is this Shanghai. So I'm going to make a note of this as well for you. So let's make a quick note here, and I'll put the same these same maps I'm downloading. I'll put them in the YouTube description so you can download them as well. So let's click this one and we'll pick another one as well. So let's do something like natural light. Let's see. Let's try this one here. So I'll copy this and I'll put a link to both of these maps in the YouTube description. And we'll download this one as well. So let's open up this folder and we drag and drop them into here. And we can close this down. Let's go back to Blender. So we want to go to shading here. And inside shading we want to select world settings. And if you don't see these two here, you need to zoom out because they may be at the top somewhere. You just zoom right out until you can see them, and then just zoom in on them. Hold down the shift key and the middle mouse button, and then you can pan this around, right, to position it. Let's just drag this here like this. Let me zoom in a little bit for you. So let's press Shift and A, and we want to insert a shader background here and connect that to here like this. Then press Shift and A, and we want to add a mix shader and connect it in between these two here at the top like this here. Then we'll press Shift A and we want to add a texture, which is going to be an environmental texture, and we'll connect that to the color here. We'll press Shift A and we want to add a mapping, and we'll connect that to here like this, and this allows us to control the HDRI map and rotate it to change our lighting. And let's press Shift A and we want to insert a texture coordinate, and then finally we want a light path. And what we need to do, let's zoom out a little bit. There is camera right at the top here. We want to connect that to the factor over here, and then click open, go to the HDRI folder, and we'll select this. Let's select this Sinatra one for the moment, and then go to your render view. You have to click the render view here. Now you can see what that looks like, right? Looks different. And you can rotate the map here, you see? You can rotate up and down, you can get better lighting, and you can experiment with it. Let's choose the other map as well. So let's click open, and then we'll click on this one here as well. Just double click and then it will load up that map, and you can rotate that one, change it, do whatever you like. find some really like nice colors. Experiment, right? That's what it's all about. So I'm going to leave it like around sort of, let's say, kind of like this sort of purple color. So let's go back to the layout. So remember we're looking at look dev right now. So you've got wireframe, you've got solid view, you've got look dev, which is like your temporary HDRI lighting, and then you've got your render view, which is actually what the render will look like. So if we were to press F12 on our keyboard, we zoomed in quite close with the camera, but that is actually, you know, similar color to what we're expecting. So let's sort out our camera. So what we'll do is we'll just move our object to where we like the view, and then just simply press Control Alt and 0. So that moves the camera into that exact same position. And what we want to do is click on the camera here, and we want to move the camera back a little bit, right? So let's press number 3. Let's zoom out a little bit, and this should be our camera here. Let's just drag it back a little bit, and we can adjust it here as well a little bit. So we can move it backwards and forwards here, we can move it up and down, and then left and right here, like this. Just want to get it roughly in position. So let's go back and we'll zoom in a little bit here, click play. Now we can see these particles being emitted, and we want to do a little bit more work with this, right? So we want to improve this a little bit. So let's pause this. I think the wise thing to do is file save as, and let's save it as the next version. Okay, so I want to add like a background around this sphere behind it, and the easy way to do that, I guess, is just to, if we just middle mouse click and rotate around, doesn't really matter where, press Shift A, and we'll insert another UV sphere. Let's insert another UV sphere. So we can see that in the center there, and it's been added to the particles collection. So you want to drag it out to the top collection here. Yeah, it must sit in this top collection, not the particles one. Should really minimize that. We don't really want anything apart from particles being in this collection. So this new sphere, we're going to just name it sphere background, and we want to scale it up. So if we zoom out a bit, let's see. Let's have a look here. Let's go into solid view for the moment, and what I'm looking for, I can find it. Let's click on the camera. Okay, the camera's over here. So we can see the camera over here, and I want to scale up this UV sphere so that it surrounds the camera. So if I click on this sphere background, I'm going to, let's turn on our overlays, that might help. So if we turn on overlays, we'll be able to see that camera clearly. Let's click on this sphere background, it's right in the center here, and let's press S to scale, and just keep scaling it out, keep going until the camera is inside this sphere. So the camera is actually inside, so when we press 0, we'll be inside of this sphere, which also has this other sphere inside of it, if that makes sense. Now let's click on this background sphere. Let's go to the modifier, add modifier, and we want to subdivide again by 3, and click apply, and then we want to right click here and shade it smooth, and then let's go to our render view, just move the camera slightly, and what we want to, let's actually press 0 so we can see what the camera sees, and let's go to our material. Let's double click here, copy this, create a new material, paste that name here, and then in the, let's see, what do we want to do here? Let's have a little think about this. What we would do is, let's see, we want to give this material, we want to make it quite dark actually. So I'm going to darken it down to almost like a pretty much black material, and then the roughness, I want to bring that down a bit as well. So as I do that, you'll see it's going to affect this sphere. So if I go back and click play now you can see all these colors getting rippled through like this. That's kind of the objective, right? So the roughness will affect that as well. So the more or less you give it, it's going to affect this sphere. And also you can go into the shading here, click render view, you can see it, press 0 so you can see what the camera sees. This is exactly what the camera is seeing, right? You can rotate this, you can change the colors now. You can affect the what this sphere is going to look like by rotating the HDRI background behind it. So you can make some real dramatic changes here. I think something like this looks pretty cool, and you know, it's ready for you to go and experiment and play around with the settings now and see what sort of animation you can create from this. So I won't be doing any sort of camera work today. I think we just wanted to create this tutorial, show you how to create the glass shader, and then you can go and experiment with these particles. You don't have to have spherical particles in there. It could have been any shape that you wanted. It could even be more glass particles within this glass sphere. You could do something like that, something a bit different. I thought this looked pretty cool. I don't know how you can use it. You need to go and experiment with it, and maybe looks like a bit like a crystal ball or something like that, right? Something a bit different. So the last thing we'll do is go to file. Let's just go to file, save as. Let's save this as version 6. And a couple of things that you can do to this now. You can go to the emitter here, click on the particle settings. You can change the number of particles. Sometimes it's worth turning off the overlay. So when you turn off the overlay, it won't show all these little dots where all the particles are and the X and Y arrows or lines. You can just see everything quite clearly now, right? So you can increase the number of particles. You can set it to a stupid number like 2000 particles. And because this sphere is set up to be a collision with the actual sphere itself, the particles can never escape this sphere. They will always bounce back in. That's quite an interesting effect. So let's go back to, that's a bit overkill, right? So I kind of like having a few particles, not too many, maybe 25, maybe 50, but I don't think it needs like anything more than that, just to give it that sort of effect. Okay, so I'm going to leave you to go and experiment with this. You can zoom pretty much right into this this sphere, get really close, do some nice close-up animation work, and then zoom out and show it. You can rotate around this scene so you can see what it looks like. Yeah, so you could animate your camera from this sort of angle and show the sphere like this. So this would be quite interesting as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to file, save. We'll minimize this. That's the end of this tutorial. I hope you find it interesting, and I look forward to seeing you on the next DCP web tutorial.